Welcome everyone to the Believe in Yourself Heart and Mind podcast, where I have a very special guest. He is quite a performer in the industry of leadership, communication, and constantly still teaching people about all of his global work in the bank industry, to being executive director and even a CEO. So I'm super excited to have a really experienced individual who's all about authenticity, about creating really long-lasting relationships, and just making the world a better place by what he shares in terms of what people might not even want to talk about, and then going straight into having those conversations with people on social media. So I'm super excited to introduce you to our special guest today, Bret Packard. And Bret, could you just quickly introduce a bit about yourself, along with why leadership in your conversations?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I've really been looking forward to that ever since we met, and I think you're doing great work. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm grateful to join your program here, and as often as you'd like to have me. Maybe I'll start with the why leadership approach, and then I'll kind of back into a little bit about me. But the leadership, it really took a journey. I had a 30-year career working across 30 different countries. Most of the time was in Asia, but I basically worked nearly everywhere. I worked in the Middle East. I worked in Africa, lived in Africa for a couple of years, and lived in Dubai, worked across different countries on the Northern African belt, in the Middle East, and across the entire continent. And I also lived in the UK for 3 years, so I have experience in Europe, and lived in Singapore 3 different times, and worked extensively in 12 different countries in Asia Pacific, including 6 years in Japan, where I lived in Japan for 6 years. And I worked in the global banking and wealth management space during that time for 3 different banks. One was a U.S. bank, the other a U.S.-based bank, the other was a British-based bank, and the third was an Australian-based bank. And so I've been around the circuit. Part of my, experience, reputation has been a leader that has been able to navigate crisis conditions. So really starting back in the first crisis I ever encountered and gained a lot of experience was the Asian financial crisis. Back in the crisis was in 1997, and I got called over in 1998 to Asia to help build an American style sales process in Asian cultures. So that was an interesting way to learn, but it was learning and helping recover from a crisis is an amazing experience. And then fast forward a few years, I was in Japan when the 9/11 tragedy hit, and leading a very large part of a huge business where I had responsibility for a lot of people, and helping to recover from the aftermath of the financial damage and frankly mental damage. Everybody was scared, as you know, after 9/11 happened. So navigating the business through that. And then I was in the UK and over in the Middle East when the global financial crisis happened in 2008-ish, and that type of thing. And then actually was assigned to Zambia down in Southern Africa, where I lived in a hotel for a year and helped to rebuild that business after the price of copper was severely compressed as a result of the global financial crisis. And there was a heavy concentration of dependency that's one of the country's main resources, natural resources, but recovering that business that had a significant part of which maybe concentrated a bit too much in the mining industry. So I helped to recover that as well. And so my leadership to me is really about a diverse set of experiences and making sure that you're able to cultivate the right type of culture, ecosystem, so that people can perform at their potential. And that's really what my definition, after adding up everything that I just mentioned to you, when you add it all up at the end of the day, it's really enabling an environment where everybody can participate and perform at their full potential.
And you know what's interesting? I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent because for some reason when you're talking about leadership and like all the different people and the cultures and interactions that you've ever had in your career, and I imagine you being like a parent and almost trying to figure it out. Like, was there actually a book or someone to tell you or show you, like, hey, this is how you become a leader, and just do it this way, and you'll like do a really good job, and you'll be successful? Or did you just kind of like go through it, messy and all, and figure it out yourself? Like, what did you do? What did you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I know why you're asking that question, my friend, because basically when adversity strikes, there's not, everybody's looking around trying to find somebody that knows what to do. What do we do? People are nervous, their families are nervous, the same processes that might have worked yesterday don't really work today because everything has changed. COVID being a good example of that. That's another crisis, as well. So I would say I had to learn as I go. It was a lot of baptism by fire. It was being held accountable for delivering outcomes and results while making sure that ecosystem remained customer centric, employee centric, and shareholder centric and community centric. So I call the 4 C's. You've got customer, you've got colleagues, you've got the company or the shareholder, which is why you're there, to generate profit, and the community in which you operated. So those 4 C's become very important, and they force you to start to, balance and keep a long-term perspective on things while you're delivering in the short term. And that's not always easy because there are some trade-offs that you have to make in regards to hiring decisions and different forks in the road that you encounter when a crisis hits as well. So there is no book on this as well. It's experience. It's failing a lot. It's succeeding, but it's succeeding more than failing. And it's if I failed one time at something, one of the things I prided myself on is not failing again at the same thing. So I think repeated failures is where people tend to get into a lot of trouble. But I don't fit that box. I've never believed in repeated failures. I believe that if there's something that happens, first of all, I never expect to fail. And I think that's another mistake that people make, is that they hear a lot of people talking about it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. They read a book about Elon Musk. It's okay to fail. But if you really study Elon Musk and you study the people that are saying this, that have actually performed in adverse conditions, what tends to happen is that they don't expect to fail. Okay, but the real world's not perfect. So I think it's very important to draw that distinction of never expecting to fail. If you make a decision, you make that decision right. And if there's a problem along the way, you can fix it. Just don't repeat the same problem.
Can you just break it down a little bit? Not expecting to fail. I think it may be a bit hard for some people to understand because, like you were saying, it's very common, parents tell you or teachers tell you, it's like, it's okay, try again.
Right.
And, or, like this kind of the culture in your company sometimes too. It's like we'll iterate, and like we'll make it better over time. What are your thoughts on that?
That's right. So there's different types of cultures out there, right? So the one type of culture says, if you fail, I'm going to fire you. Okay, that's a kind of a toxic, type of culture that does not foster innovation. So if people are afraid to make a mistake because of how they're compensated, how their performance is assessed, if they're in some cultures, are they demoted if they fail? Whatever the reason is, that's not a good culture. So that's one type, or let's call that type one. The type two culture is one that accepts failure in the spirit of constantly innovating and creating, but they wind up never creating and innovating because they're always cleaning up the messes from repeated failures, okay, of the same thing over and over again. Let's call that type two. Then you have type three, which has a performance culture, and it says, look, it's okay to fail. We're going to reward you for innovation. We're going to reward you for collaboration on re-engineering processes, on making products, on refining the way that we service customers, refining and redefining a new way to engage with the communities that hasn't worked. So everything around generating profit, new ways of generating profit. Maybe you're going for more passive income instead of active income as well. So all of those different things in this, let's call it type three, if you create that type of culture, you're going to find that you innovate, but at the same time you perform, and at the same time, by definition, you're actually, if you do make a mistake, then your performance culture is such that you don't keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. So everybody would love to work for type three culture, I'm sure. And if you're not working for type three, you should look to do it that way. But there's not a lot of leaders that really know how to foster that type of culture as well. And so I would say that to get back to your question about, to talk more about it, I would say, okay, well, you've got these roughly three types out there as well. And I think that leaders really need to work on, what does it take? What are the inputs required to build the type three type of culture that we just spoke about, where you can spur innovation, spur creativity, and make sure that people don't get punished for failing, but their performance, they will be held accountable for both creativity as well as repeated failures of the same thing, right? So if your fundamental business is making watches, okay, and you get really creative with the software, but if the hardware doesn't work and people purchase your product and it doesn't turn on, then that's a performance issue, and that type of thing as well. So you would expect that leader would put in quality types of programs to make sure that the basic hygiene of the business is in place. Can you imagine Apple creating a product like an iPhone, and they produce 4 million of these things and they don't work, right? So the world's most valuable company makes sure that quality is embedded with, and I think that you would agree also that they're perhaps the most creative company in the world as well. So they have both. They have that type three culture where they're accountable for delivering quality, dependability. It works, right? It works really well. But at the same time, to create something that is as powerful as the first rocket that went to the moon from a computing standpoint, which is what the average iPhone is able to do. It's actually more powerful than the computer that powered that rocket. So that's a pretty amazing way to look at it. And I think regardless of whatever business you're in, you can look at it the same way that Apple Apple does as well, is you put the client experience in the middle. And if something goes wrong, you make it right, and you make it right quickly. You don't inflict pain on your customers. And that's what a good performance culture is able to do. It's able to reward its people for actually taking care of that customer who's actually indirectly paying your salary.
Well, beautifully said. And I like how you segmented into 3 different areas to really think about some people's current experiences, or maybe perhaps imagine what the third type looks like. And if, especially, most people haven't experienced it. I'm just thinking to myself, because again, it's a little bit hard to kind of like imagine unless I am hearing from maybe a specific scenario or story of, because the thing is, the last part you said was customer centric, and I thought that was so key. So that tells me that there is high value around business drive for data, understanding different skill sets, and bringing different talents together, along with having leadership that can say like, hey, we're really doing it this way and it's not right or whatever, and being really clear in terms of what the focus might be and how to direct a large team. Can you maybe recall a specific company, or you don't have to name the name, but like a specific company or culture that allows you to, as a leader, speak up and share, and then for the team to be so effective? How did you go about, working with companies like that versus the companies in type 1 or type 2?
Yeah, well, let's understand, first of all, that a culture is really fostered by the people that are inside of that company, right? So it's not something that, and that's where a lot of companies make a mistake. They have an HR manual, and it talks about the values, and it talks about, all the things that you're supposed to do in the first week. You go to orientation, and you're supposed to read the manual and then live the values. Well, I think that a specific example that I'll give you was my time with Barclays in the UK, when I was one of 5 managing directors that were assigned to help an ailing bank that had a toxic culture. It was on a BBC, something called a whistle dog, or some sort of, it's a 60 minutes in the US equivalent, a national television program. 2 weeks after I was hired, there was a feature on Barclays, and it was on the toxic culture in the environment. And it did a feature where the BBC reporter had gone in with a camera. They had implanted spies in the business and had recorded Barclays employees yelling at customers for not meeting their sales goals. It had the punishment that would happen if you didn't make your target for the day, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not a good look on that as well. So I was one of 5 people brought in to clean up a lot of that. And in 2 weeks into the job, to come home at night, and my wife and I turned on the TV and to say, did we really join a company that's this bad? Is it really this bad? And it was really bad. And so that's where we started in that assignment. And if you fast forward 18 months after that, and then right after we changed it all, the global financial crisis hit. And thank goodness we had changed it, because we were then prepared, and we were durable enough to actually thrive during the global financial crisis. So did we feel it? We felt it. But actually, our people were part of a mission that was this type 3 situation that we spoke about with culture. So the question is, how did we get there? Well, there's a couple of things that I'll talk about here. One is we embarked upon a program driven by something that I've called ALA, which is ask, listen, and act. We went all over the UK, all over the country, and we started asking employees, what are your pain points? What are we doing wrong? What is leadership doing wrong? What bothers you when you go home at night? How did you feel when you first joined the company, and how do you feel now? What changed to change the feeling? Because, you know, if you think about it, when you first join a company, you're all excited, you go in on Monday, and then a lot of people 5 years later, they don't really feel that same excitement that they felt when they agreed to join the company. So the question is, something happened between then and now. So we went around and we asked a lot of questions. We took a lot of notebooks with us, and we wrote down the responses. So the A is to ask. The L is to listen, is to genuinely listen, to actively listen to what was being said out there. And then the other A in ALA is to take action. So what we then did is we then put together a list of everything, hundreds of things, everything from the way that we set goals to measure performance to undertake processes. We had too many products out there. People weren't necessarily trained thoroughly enough on the products. They didn't feel confident. So we took all of that, made a laundry list full, and we chose a certain number of those that were manageable. And we went back and we negotiated with our people. And it wasn't like a union negotiation because it was their list. And so we basically said, look, realistically, we can do these 5 things in 6 months. We can do these 10 things in the next year. And we can do these 25 things in the next year and a half. Are you with us? Yeah, you know, that seems reasonable. We would move around some of them. And then what we would do is to basically say, okay, if we do these 35 things, then I need you to do these 3 things. Okay. And it was an easy kind of negotiation because it was, you know, we're giving you 24,000, by the way, this is 24,000 employees. So this is a big organization, right? In a big country. And so we basically did that. So that's one approach you could take. One of the biggest things that came out of that, one of the things on the list was the way that goals were set. So instead of just giving people what we call targets, we said, look, we're going to change this to goals. And we're going to train your leadership on how to sit down with you. And this is the way that we're going to incentivize you. And we're going to tool you up and empower you to set your own goals. So instead of management, leadership setting the goals, we're going to empower you to set the goals. You know what happened after the first year and then the ensuing years after that is that the actual production and sales volumes from the sales force, a huge part of that 24,000 employees, was nearly 4 times what it was when management was allocating tops down sales targets. So instead we did bottoms up. We just turned it completely upside down. But it wasn't necessarily our idea. It was the result of the conversations that we had and talking to the people that actually performed the work. And we had 100% commitment. We didn't need to worry about employee engagement. We didn't need to worry about customer service. All of a sudden, we had an army of 24,000 people that were with us. And was every single person with us? No, they weren't, right? There was a whole bunch of people in middle management that were trying to block us from doing this because they're in survival mode. They try to always outlive senior management. So it's a little complicated, but we cleaned those people out. They were gone, and they were a big part of the toxic culture within the bank as well. So we identified who they were, removed them, and kind of cleansed the organization. And the people just loved us, so they fell in love with leadership. So fast forward a few years later, when I went down to Zambia, I did the same exact process that I just described in Zambia. Completely different culture, Southern Africa versus the UK, a fully developed country versus an emerging country, and it worked like a beauty. And so I think the bottom line is, as long as people are involved, you need to apply people solutions to whatever business that you're in. Hopefully that was specific enough for you. Yeah.
That was super specific. What a great story, and an empowering one too, to know the kind of impact that you and your team were able to do for, people who wanted to improve and to make a difference in other people's lives, but they weren't seeing the results, or they were getting a lot of pushback. So what's interesting, as I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking, like, while you were doing that for other people, you probably were instilling some of those same mindset and values to yourself. Carrying around like a notebook and reflecting and allowing yourself to think about, what are some 3 things I could be working on to do even more, do better? Who can hold me accountable and, allow me to kind of, work on my potential, things like that. So would you say that those are some of the things that you also have to kind of develop in order to achieve those kind of results? Or was it in the midst of working with people that you also learned to develop those skills as well?
I think it's a bit of both. I think we all have to kind of find our way, and what works for us the best. And one of the keys is collaboration is certainly important. And so is individual contribution. That you can collaborate all you want, but collaboration in the purest sense of the word means that you're also performing and you're not holding back the rest of the team. So a big part of it is, how are you driving your own performance? How are you performing in conjunction with the rest of the team and shaping the culture? I'll give you a great analogy with this, and that is, if you take a fish tank, and there's just to simplify it, two major types of fish. You've got saltwater fish and freshwater fish, right? And if you try putting a freshwater fish in a saltwater tank, it's not going to do very well. Probably won't survive, right? And vice versa. And if you view the tanks as ecosystems, what you do, back to your question here, is you find a way to, instead of just changing out the fish, right, and doing that as well, is there a way to make a hybrid type of tank where all the different fish can survive? And then you get the beauty of diversity, right, in the picture as well. Diversity of thought, mainly, is what I'm talking about here. So are you able to take different people from different backgrounds, different levels of experiences, and blend them together with seasoned, in the case that we're talking about today, bankers, people that have a deep background in that? Are you able to then take people that have retail experience, insurance experience, wealth management experience, and to blend them together in the same fish tank so that everybody can prosper? And this is the point that most leaders that I've encountered in my career, and today, this is a chronic problem in the United States in companies, that they either feel, hey, this is a saltwater tank or a freshwater tank, and if you're a freshwater fish, there's no room for you in the saltwater tank, so you're out. Okay, and then people all of a sudden say, wow, what happened? I got my degree, I have a student loan, and I come in here and they didn't teach me that it was saltwater. I thought that, hey, I'm a freshwater fish, so what's the problem here? And so just reject the fish, right? And then you've got a bunch of fish on the sidelines. When leadership is capable, if they're aware of it, of actually changing the tank out and being able to accommodate all different types of people as well. And I think that problem is led to something, in the lack thereof led to something called the Great Resignation in the United States, that everybody became aware of after COVID hit. And that's really the root cause of this problem. It wasn't COVID, it was the fact of this fish tank analogy that I'm talking about.
Oh, that was just such a creative analogy. I was just thinking like, wow, whoever thought you could actually do a hybrid tank? And thinking
Right.
about,
Yeah,
right?
most people just say, "Hey, you're not the right kind of fish for this company. You're not the right person for this company, right? So it's just not working out. So you should probably find a job somewhere else." That's the common approach when this happens. Instead of saying, "Hey, what could you be good at?" Right? What could you be good at, and what could I do to better accommodate a new way of thinking inside the company? And so, how can I change the solution of this water? That's really what somebody that understands culture. And I found there's a lot of people out there, not just on social media, but in the marketplace, pretending to talk a lot about culture, and they say things culture eats strategy for lunch, and but they don't know what they're talking about, because until you've been able to actually change the composition of the water, um, you really don't know what an ecosystem is, right? You take it for granted. And it took me 19 years into my 30-year career to learn this. So it wasn't something that I learned out of school. It wasn't something I learned at my first company, because that was a freshwater tank. And it took me I was that freshwater fish going into a saltwater tank when I moved to the UK. And so that was a tough one for me personally in my career. It was a big jolt and an awakening. Unfortunately, I had an ALA mindset, and so I was willing to learn, and to learn about how can I actually, maybe the problem's not with the fish, maybe the problem's not with me, maybe the problem is the water. So why don't I learn how to change the water? And fortunately, I was working with and for some people that had done this before, and they were great teachers, and I was a great student. And so we figured out how to get it done.
That's really powerful. I do have a curious question for you, and this is around mindset. As you were speaking, um, there is such a thing that people go around saying, just have a positive mindset, or then you can have a positive attitude, things like that. But what you were saying was, let's have an ALA mindset. What's the difference, and how does it help you become more bold? Which way kind of allows you to do that?
Yeah. So first of all, I've never believed that positive thinking by itself works, because it doesn't. Okay. If you've got, if you know, there are a lot of people, tens of thousands of people out there saying, if you have positive, I don't believe in affirmations. I don't believe that they work. Now, if you believe that they work and they work for you, great, but they've never worked for me. So, because positive thinking by itself, and again, the key is what I'm saying here, by itself doesn't work. But positive thinking coupled with action works like a charm. Okay. So if you have an idea, the shorter the time between an idea and acting on that idea, the quicker a person can get into what I call the zone. You may have heard about the zone. The zone is a place that you feel you can do no wrong. And whatever you touch turns to gold. So the sooner you come up with an idea and you start to work on that idea, okay, knowing and accepting that you're going to have some failures along the way, not repeated failures, but you're going to have some failures along the way. What tends to happen is that you will find yourself operating in the zone. You can fix things really quickly. You can progress and move much faster. And all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you realize, I'm winning a lot more than I'm losing, right? So positive thinking with inaction is for losers. Positive thinking with action is what winners do. And ALA is just merely a way of taking action. But before you take that action, it's the instead of just an A, it's ALA. So you want to make sure that you're engaging with the right stakeholders in the equation, because if you're trying to achieve something without anybody else's support, you also won't succeed. So you've got to have people with you as well. So it needs both as well. But hopefully that kind of clarifies your question around the differences between just an affirmation and actually putting that to use.
Yeah, definitely. It really does. Action definitely allows you to see the difference between what idea really matters to you as well, and how much
Right.
you're engaged with that part of your life and what you actually kind of are walking away from. So I do agree with that. And I wanted to just like kind of follow up with that idea with, if you could walk me through a specific example in your life where you you weren't acting, but then you decided to act. What was that like for you? How did you kind of go about, I imagine, iterating upon that and making fewer mistakes, right? Learning from your mistakes, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a good example. 1980, I don't know, the mid 80s, 1984, 1985, something like that. I 2 years of college under my belt at a junior college, and then I go off to the big university. And after 10 days, I dropped out. I just quit. Couldn't take it. I didn't like the food. I didn't like the way the professor combed his hair. I didn't like the every single person around me. I just, it was a bit of an attitude. I had a bit of an attitudinal problem in hindsight. And after 10 days, I called my parents up and said, I can't take it anymore. I'm gonna leave. And so went back home. And then I said to myself, because I had all these dreams at the time to be an engineer. And that was just my dream. I was going to be an electrical engineer. And so 2 years under my belt, go up there. My parents invest a lot of money in to get me into the school, and then I pull out. So what that taught me, that failure, which I never repeated again. Ever since then, I never quit at anything in my life. So it's been since 1985. You can do the math. What, at 95? So nearly 40 plus, about 40 years ago, right? That would be about when that was. I haven't quit anything in 40 years since that happened. And so that's an example of, I think, having a positive mindset and not doing anything because I was uncomfortable. I had a poor attitude and that type of thing. So I learned from that. And so to finish the story, I went back home, kind of started reading some books and got my head back together back there in 84, 85, and then went back to school, got my degree in banking and finance. I decided that there was really no reason to be an engineer. That was part of the problem here. I didn't really enjoy calculus 4, and all these other topics. I wanted to deal more with people than with numbers. And so I took up banking. And so I would say that personal experience taught me at a very young age, perhaps I was lucky, at a very young age, that attitude is so important. And you and I've talked before about what performance is. And performance is really and I created this after my corporate career ended based on all of the experiences added up. So the performance formula is attitude plus hard work minus hypocrisy or lies. And what I learned about that last piece, a lot of people hear me give that formula and they say, well, I haven't heard that before. And that's really, that formula summarizes my experience at being able to work around the world in adverse environments, to perform, and to retire financially independent at the age of 52. So it works. I can back it up with my own story. So you've got to have the attitude. You've got to have the hard work. And a lot of people, they stop right there, because what tends to happen, and then they wonder, why am I not successful? I have a great attitude and I work really hard. So what's the problem, right? What's the issue here? Well, the issue is is that usually the reason why you're not performing is that you're caught up cleaning up messes, getting out of situations where people have lied to you. They told you one thing and done another thing. That's hypocrisy. And so if you don't learn how to detect hypocrisy and the lies of the real world, because they are there. And a lot of people say, Bret, I don't want to hear about the ugly stuff. Just tell me the good stuff, right? Let's talk about attitude. Let's talk about hard work. And I said, sorry, with me, you're going to get equal airtime from all three, right? All three are important, because it's that third one, the ugly one, that a lot of people, they don't want to touch. They think they can do it without having to address the issue of hypocrisy. And so I learned that formula, you've got to learn to detect it and get it out of your life, okay, one way or another. Sometimes just ignoring it isn't going to get the job done, but you've got to figure out a way to detect it and to then manage it. And then you'll find that you're able to stay focused, and your attitude and your hard work is able to yield performance because you've dealt with these distractions.
I want to break it down just a little bit. You said recognize hypocrisy. It's not always very easily visible because, especially
Right.
with the remote setting and everything, or people have their own rooms and, they'll say I'm busy, blah, blah. Like, how can one recognize, especially in a short amount of time? Because sometimes it takes a while to see trends and patterns in a person. How can you do that earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's I mean, it's experience comes into play a lot, but what I really tell people is you can look for the big things. So because the ones you really have to watch out for are not so obvious as you're mentioning, right? So you get in and you find that the lizard is under the rock. It's not on top of the rock, right? So how are you able to see what's under the rock? And one of there's several ways to answer your question, but I'll just talk about a couple of them. One of them would be specifically is instant gratification. Okay, if you encounter somebody that you don't know and they're talking about something that feels too good to be true, it requires something called critical thinking to really think through, okay, what is this person really talking about here? Okay, is there substance to it? Because if it usually, had somebody tell me one time, I was in the Philippines, and I remember really clearly, it was 2005 in the Peninsula Hotel in Manila. I flew in, and we had a global product head from Mexico. He was Mexican, and he came in, and we were trying to decide, should we allow the country to launch a Philippine peso bond? And I had discovered that they didn't disclose a key element in the proposal to us. So I spoke with him about that. And these things were in Philippine peso currency. And we typically didn't permit distribution of products at that point in time in local currency. We would require US dollars. So, and we did fine. We were the most profitable wealth business in Asia. So a lot of people say, well, you probably didn't make any money if you didn't allow that, but actually they were all wrong. And we had a number one market share. So they had omitted a part of the way that people could buy these bonds in local currency. And that went against one of these policy pillars that we had to manage the risk. And so the Mexican guy said to me, he said, Bret, he said, if it's a donkey, it's a donkey. And that was it. We didn't launch it. It doesn't matter how you dress it up, how fancy the 30-page proposal is. If it's a donkey, it's a donkey. It's not a horse, right? It's a donkey. So to get back to your point here, if somebody promises you something that seems too good to be true, just assume that you're right about that and they're wrong. Because in life, if it's easy and if it involves a shortcut, it's a shortcut. It's not going to last for very long. So that's one way to do it that way. If it feels in your stomach too good to be true, trust your gut. I'd say another one would be instant gratification. And this one's really tricky because the younger generations were brought up and educated to expect instant gratification with everything they do. And one of the things that the younger generation gets into the corporate life in many countries, and they find that they're not being instantly gratified. Hey, where's gratification? I was in school, I was given a trophy for 5th place. So now the rewards program of this company, I didn't get anything. I also didn't perform, by the way, but hey, I'm not supposed to perform because I should get a trophy for just showing up. So whose fault is that? Is that the person's fault? I would argue it's not. That's the institutionally, especially in the United States, the big institutions have rewarded lying to people. So that's rewarded. There's no punishment for lying. But then when you get out in the real world and you don't perform, who's broken the promise here, right? So that's why it's really important to understand, especially Generation Z, that it's not necessarily their fault when you hear a lot of these stories. Now, some are attitudinal in nature and all of this, but for the most part, leaders need to understand this is what people were taught. So leaders have to start to teach the truth. And this is why that formula is so important, because if you don't take off the hypocrisy, which is what we're talking about right now, and how to detect it. So I would say any promises of instant gratification is probably hypocrisy. I haven't seen a situation that has been healthy. Typically, unhealthy habits are the result of, and they do give you instant gratification. Drugs being an example, right? And there's a lot of institutions in the United States trying to reward people for taking drugs. Okay, if you look at the criminal system, and it's okay to do that. Well, but is that healthy for the person's long-term success if they take drugs, right? Probably not. But in the short term, it is. In the short term, I guess, I've never taken drugs, by the way. But in the short term, I guess that people get instant gratification by taking fentanyl, right? They feel good about it. So just be careful about anything. That's on the drug front. In business, it might be something like if somebody's desperate to hire you to fill a position, and you're there and they like you, and they promise you, yeah, if you come on board, I'll pay you $22,000 a year base salary. And next year, I think you can probably be earning $35,000. You say, whoa, that's great. I'd love to have that. So I'm all in. Before you go all in, maybe you should talk to some other people in the company and kind of see, because I can tell you that probably won't happen. It's too good to be true. Instant gratification after a year is not enough time to really do something for the average person and contribute significantly enough to warrant nearly double a salary. So I would just say these are kind of two examples. One's a salary, one's drugs. Be careful of instant gratification because it almost always leads to hypocrisy. and it will wind up detracting from your own performance as well. So hopefully those two are enough to kind of get you started. But there's a whole list of other things out there as well. People should follow me on LinkedIn. I talk about this frequently, about how to detect it, how to look for it. There's all sorts of things. Hypocrites don't like to be debated. So if you challenge a hypocrite, they change the subject. That's another subtle sign that maybe hypocrisy is at work here. If you're asking a question about something, but you don't ever get the answer, if you've ever dealt with anybody like that, it's kind of like nailing jelly to a wall. It's really hard to do. I can't even do that. So, but I can learn to detect the jelly. And these people I stay away from, and I won't work with or for.
Wow. Okay. Those are really good nuances to look out for, so that anyone who is ever curious about whether or not they're in a situation working with a hypocritical individual, they can look out for. But then I'm also thinking, there's always like that conversation with yourself. Are you being honest? And are you showing integrity also? And I think learning to practice that with yourself is also a good indicator on how good you can detect it with someone else, right?
I think you're right. I think you're spot on, because it all, at the end of the day, it all starts from within. Because let's say every night we go to bed, you put your head on the pillow. It's only you putting your head on the pillow. Do you have peace of mind with everything in your life, which includes your job? It includes your personal life. It includes your health. It includes all sorts of stuff, right? You throw it all. What's the saying? Throw the kitchen sink at me, and am I happy with it or not? And if you don't have peace of mind, you're not going to have peace when you put your head on the pillow. And so do something about it, if that's the case, right? So putting your head on the pillow is a great test for how are you doing with life.
That is a great way to help anyone else who's looking to kind of work on themselves. So thank you for sharing that tip, because all of us will need to go to bed or lay our head down somewhere.
That's right.
I wanted to close by asking you this one question of who or what inspires you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? It faded out.
Oh, no worries. Who or what inspires you?
I would say I inspire myself. So, and it took a long time to learn that. So that's not something that I have lived by my entire life, but I live by it now, and I inspire myself. My wife inspires me with her compassion for other people. She's taught me so much in that space. I would say those are the two things, but I'm also inspired by how I've been able to impact people as a leader. When I wake up in the morning and I check my messages on my phone, and I have a text from people in Zambia that were tellers, bank tellers, back when I was the CEO of that bank, which is and was the largest bank in the country. I didn't work with these people on a daily basis, but they still remember what I did for them. And they send me a text. I get these texts and it says, "Good morning, Bret. I hope you have a great day." To me, that is the ultimate compensation for what I've done as a leader, and I haven't even been back to Zambia in the last, I don't know, maybe 12 years. 2012 was the last time. So 13 years. I haven't been back to, sorry, I can't do math. 11 years. I haven't been back to Zambia in 11 years. And these people still remember me and think enough of me to just say, "Good morning, Mr. Packard. Hope you have a great day." That's it. They don't want anything. They just remember, right? And so to me, and I've got people from all over the world that does that. And there's not a better compliment that I could ever ask for. So that also inspires me as well.
Wow. I think you're probably the first person who ever said that you inspire yourself. It's such an amazing experience, I'm sure. And I hope more people get a chance to say that and declare that they inspire themselves instead of always looking elsewhere
So
and
do I.
outside. Yeah.
Right.
So thank you for being inspiration to us and, declaring how inspirational you are and to create such a long-term impact for so many people and so many lives all over the world. I'm sure it's not just Zambia or any, the UK probably even, or Australia and others who remember you. So I just hope that we can continue to be encouraged that our lives do matter. And it is here
Right.
to empower ourselves and others around us. So we all have a story to share. And thank you for sharing your story, Bret. And where can people find you? I know you said LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah, and I'd just like to conclude, and then I'll answer your question. Anybody can do what you and I've spoken about on this as well, and that's important. So I hope that for those of you listening, watching this, that you know that you can do whatever. The way you do it might be different than how I've described it, but you can do it. And start by mastering the management of yourself before you start to tackle other people, because usually that's where the problems are with leadership issues, is that people tend to have a problem managing themselves, and then they are in charge of other people and their destiny as well. And if you're unable to manage yourself, your time, your priorities, your goals, your health, all of these things, master that, and then you can help other people do the same thing. It doesn't work in reverse. It won't work that way. People can find me. The best place to find me for in-depth discussion around many of these topics, culture, hypocrisy, attitude, hard work, elite performance, any of this stuff. My wisdom from all of my posts on LinkedIn come from journals that I kept. And these journals kept over 30 years. There's 89 books of handwritten concepts. They're real situations that I personally went through. And so follow me on LinkedIn for that is the best way. But I'm also there. The light touch version is on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook as well. So that's me.
And Bret, are you looking to publish any of your work?
Right now, the publishing is just on those channels as well. I think there's so many books out there that right now I like to fly in less crowded airspace, and that's just the point of my life that I'm in. So maybe someday, but thanks for asking, and I'll make sure I let you know and everybody know if that changes in the future.
Yeah, that'd be really awesome. Well, here you have it. Bret is such an amazing individual who really knows his material inside out and leadership and everything he's mentioned so far, and such a wise person to talk to. So if you ever get a chance, definitely reach out to Bret because that's how I met him. But thank you so much, Bret, for this conversation. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope to learn more from you in the near future.
Likewise, it's my pleasure, Anam. I appreciate it, and you have a terrific day. And thank you to all of you that tuned into this as well.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.